brief history of why we're here. In September, there was a federal court ruling that came down about fluoride in the water from the EPA, and it was a 7.5-year hearing trial, and it ruled that the EPA needed to take a closer look at fluoride and the risk that it poses. And that started a lot of people to pay attention. We know it's been in the water for a very long time, but now it seems as though there are studies coming out that are looking at possibly adverse effects, and now it's a benefit versus risk conversation. And so we decided to look at that topic. We have passionate thoughts on both sides of it. The commissioners and I have all been studying this. This came to us in December. And so we've had 3 months, 2.5 months to look at the topic and study it. And I think it's a really important conversation to have. But before we get going, I do want to introduce you to who we have here. And I'll start with the vice mayor there. Sorry.
That's not the order you're
I know, I might reverse the order for you all. I'm sorry.
I'm Tanya Tucker. I am the Vice Mayor of the City of Bartow as City Commissioner.
And good evening, hearing all Commissioner.
Legal Law Commissioner.
Laura Simpson, Commissioner.
I'm Sean Parker. I'm the City Attorney.
Jackie Poole, the City Clerk.
Mike Hurst, City Manager.
Thank you. And so this is the team that, part of the team that helps Bartow do what we do to make our city a great place to live. So here's how it's going to go. We have presentations tonight, and we have organized it into 2 30-minute slots. So we're going to have Dr. Johnny Johnson. And what I'm going to do is, since we have a lot of information to cram into our 30 minutes and I can't see the clock, so anyway, you'll have to give me a heads up on that or something because I can't see it. I know it's going to buzz off. But let me just tell you who they are in the first panel so that the clock doesn't have to start until he gets up here. We have Dr. Johnny Johnson, and he is a pediatric dentist, a diplomat from the American Board of Pediatric Dentistry, life member of the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, the American Fluoridation Society president. And let me go ahead and give Dr. Slots too. Dr. Steve Slot will follow him. He is a general dentist with the American Fluoridation Society Communications Officer. So they will be presenting in the first 30 minutes. And Dr. Johnny, are you ready? Okay, that's okay. And there's the podium right over there. And you have the floor. We will have public comment after the presentations.
Has that got it? Yeah, can do something. How about that? Yeah, I'm Steve Slot. I'm from North Carolina, Burlington, North Carolina, where, in my background, I was in private practice in Burlington for 33 years.
Okay, Mr. Slot, hold on one second. That might turn up a little bit, right? And Jason, does that top tilt back a little bit? Where's Jason? Oh, there you are. Can you check that for him, please? We just want to make sure we hear you because we're not hearing you. And come real close. There you go.
Okay.
That's better.
Is that better? All right. I was in private practice in Burlington for 33 years. Then I worked with the state of North Carolina. And in my private practice, I saw primarily Medicaid in the underserved population. And then after that, I went to work for the state of North Carolina in the prison system, treating inmates. And after that, I worked for a few years in corporate dentistry. And as of now, I'm retired, so I've got time to do this kind of thing. And I got to tell you, and I'm paying attention to your shot clock there, so. Your weather here is addictive. We've got my wife and I are here, and we've got to drive back tonight to snow, so I don't know if I want to go back or not after all this. It really is a beautiful place. Johnny and I toured, and his wife toured the water treatment plant earlier today, and it's very impressive. You've done an excellent job with that, and I thank you for all of that. So let me just, I'm just going to give a brief overview and then let Dr. Johnson take over. So what exactly is fluoride? There's a lot of confusion about that, and particularly with the flow of misinformation that's constantly being put out there. Fluoride actually is the ionic form of the element fluoride. Fluorine. Fluorine is the 13th most abundant element on Earth. An ion is an atom. So basically, fluoride is an atom of fluorine. All right, is there a difference between natural and artificial fluoride? You'll find that fluoridation opponents frequently will try to differentiate between natural and artificial fluoride. There is no difference. A fluoride ion is a fluoride ion. It's all the same. So what is put into the water to increase the level of existing fluoride is simply more fluoride ions, just exactly what's in there to begin with. What is fluoridation? All right. Fluoridation is the addition of a minuscule amount of fluoride ions, identical to those already existing in water, to bring the level to that at which significant dental decay prevention will occur with no adverse effects. There is that sweet spot, that level at which the dental decay resistance will occur without causing adverse effects. And in 80 years of water fluoridation, there have been no proven adverse effects of water fluoridation at that level. Now, how are these ions added? Well, they are attached to a compound, and hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is most commonly used and is used here in Bartow, which dissociates into fluoride ions, hydrogen ions, and silica. Additional fluoride ions are all that remain from the compound as it leaves the water treatment plant. The compound HFA undergoes what's called hydrolysis. It disappears. It no longer exists after the water leaves the treatment plant. So what you've got is simply an increase in the fluoride ions that were there to begin with. So how do we understand the effectiveness and safety of water fluoridation? Well, we have to look at critically evaluate the quality of the overall body of science. Not simply a few studies that have been plucked out of tens of thousands of fluoride studies, which have been put forth through the decades. There is just a mountain of fluoride information which has been put forward. And to pluck a few studies out and try to put them forward now as fact, it's a mistake, a gross mistake. All right, what are some examples? Well, I see putting forward now, which I really can't believe, is a paper by Felix Mullinex, which I thought was long since gone. Seems to be making a resurgence for some reason or another. Well, she concluded fluoride could be a neurotoxicant. All right, however, a review of the scientific literature shows repeated refutes of this claim, such as, among others, we do not believe the study by Mullinex et al. Can be interpreted in any way as indicating potential for sodium fluoride to be a neurotoxicant. This is just to say that studies such as this have been refuted repeatedly in the scientific literature, and this is just one example of that. A 2015 study concludes an association of fluoride with ADHD. All right. This study has as well been refuted repeatedly in the scientific literature, such as Huber et al., for example, using the same data that was used in that study, concluded the ADHD of these same children to be due to the elevation at which they resided, not to a few fluoride ions in the water. This demonstrated a distinct lack of consideration of the variables in the original study. there are countless variables involved in such things in cognitive behavior that must be taken into account if you're going to make these kinds of claims. And as I said, Huber et al. Took the same data and concluded differently. All right, and explored exposure in ADHD. Fiore et al. Found current epidemiological evidence indicates that fluoride exposure may have neurotoxic effects on neurodevelopment, including behavioral alteration, cognitive impairment, psychosomatic issues, and this is at high level. However, the heterogeneity in study designs and results from human studies did not allow us to reliably identify fluoride exposure as a risk factor for ADHD development. More rigorous studies are needed to provide conclusive evidence of an etiologic association between pre- or postnatal fluoride exposure and ADHD. Again, different studies are refuting these studies that are constantly being put forward by fluoridation opponents. It's just a matter of knowing scientific literature, finding that literature, and being up on it. And IQ is another thing that's at the forefront. IQ claims are being made, particularly by a core group of researchers up in Canada, fluoride opponents, who have put forth the flurry of IQ studies. Well, a recent high-quality meta-analysis has separately looked at fluoride and IQ scores. This meta-analysis compared IQ scores for children whose drinking water had less than 1.5 parts per million of fluoride with those whose water had more than 1.5 parts per million of fluoride. The authors found no evidence of a fluoride IQ association between the level of 1.5. Fluoridated water is at 0.7 parts per million. And this is just one example of a few such studies. There are numerous others, which I'll be glad to provide to anyone that would like to see them. And so it goes. This, like I say, is an overview. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Johnson so he can go into a bit more detail with this. But I just wanted you to kind of understand that the body of science is what needs to be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, do we have any more chairs, please? Oh, okay, thank you. We're going to get you some chairs, folks.
Dr. Slot, talk about your shot clock continuing to run when I walked up here.
Now, you're a little bit taller, so raise that microphone up just a little bit so we can hear you. Well, not really, no.
I just wanted to say that picture on the first slide was my aunt, Dolly. She passed away last night, and she was the one that always said, "Prove it to me. I think you're lying." So she knew me well, and I always had to prove myself. And then she would say, "Okay, we grew up next to Missouri, the Show Me State." Why does oral health matter whatsoever? We're talking about a little hole in the tooth. That's all it is. We as dentists currently don't know anything besides a little hole in the tooth, according to people who oppose water fluoridation. Most people do not realize that cavities, dental decay, is the most common chronic disease of adults and children in the U.S. and around the world. The most common chronic disease. It's infectious and transmissible. It's many times more common than diabetes, obesity, and asthma. That's why it's important. People get infections, like this young lady has an infection close to her eye, her eye's closing. She has what we have as a sinus without valve between this part of our head and our brain. She's only a little tiny bit away from that infection going and giving her a brain abscess. People die of dental infections that get into their bloodstream, septicemia. I won't go into a lot of details. There's others here tonight that will probably discuss that. But I grew up like this. These other two people on the screen passed away from an abscess tooth. Not the little girls, their daddy. I will quickly go through that fluoride is needed both systemically through water fluoridation, helps permanent teeth develop harder while they're under the gums, more resistant to cavities, and also in toothpaste and mouth rinses that have fluoride. They are not separate. They're not separate. Both of them work they complement each other. Sorry, I'm going to turn the screen off. I do that all the time. I'm changing channels at home. Let's go through something that is one of the most exciting studies. There have been 4 of these around the world. And that is what happens when we withdraw fluoridated water. Because people like to say it stops a half a cavity in your lifetime. Which as a dentist, we will tell you that's baloney. I'm saying it nicely. 2 cities in Alberta, Canada, Calgary and Edmonton. Both of them are fluoridated. Up until the point of 2011, researcher Lindsay McLaren was doing a study between the 2nd grade children, how many cavities, how many fillings and teeth that were removed. Edmonton is a less bit socioeconomically advantaged. There's less, so their cavity rates were a bit higher. Well, as time went on, the city council, it's never about science, it's about politics, they voted to vote fluoridation out in 2011. What transpired after that was a steady increase in Calgary's cavities. And their children, adults too, but their children who were being studied, went from about a 40, let's see, in 2011, about a 53% of cavities, they jumped to 12 points up to 65% cavities in 2018-2019. They surpassed Edmonton, which remained pretty stable at 55%. That's what happens when you remove fluoridation. That's what goes on. We know what happens. Those people didn't stop brushing with fluoridated toothpaste. They still did. This is what it looks like when you have to treat somebody in an operating room for full mouth rehabilitation. That's sad. Taking somebody out of their mom's and dad's arms to take them into the hospital, put them to sleep, which they may not wake up from, take care of them, and then bring them back. That's horrible. We don't like to see that at all. Do we make money off of doing that? Do you think we want to make money off of doing that? It's about prevention. Fluoridated toothpaste and fluoridated water work in tandem. Yes, you still need to brush your teeth. You need to eat a good, healthy diet. Everybody should have the opportunity to see a dentist. We don't always get to do that. At least half of our country's families don't go to a dentist on a yearly basis. You want to know the truth? It's been about 4 years for me, I'll be honest. I'm going soon and praying. There are people who like to oppose fluoridation for a plethora of reasons. It's their own opinions. This was a piece that was sent to me by a dentist recently. He said, people are wanting to know answers to this. Can you give me some hyperlinks? I said, sure. Fluoride that is used in your water is said to be a toxic waste byproduct of the fertilizer industry, and we were taught as dentists in school that it helps prevent cavities, so we were brainwashed into thinking it's good, and we try and work to make sure it's in the water. Well, I went through dental school, and I can tell you that never came up. To call it a toxic waste byproduct of the fertilizer industry is to say we shouldn't use natural minerals that are already there. It's to say that beef, milk, cheese, and butter, thank you, that they're toxic waste byproducts of the leather industry. We're using every piece of things that are in the materials for a good use. In my soda, where there's phosphoric acid, that came from the fertilizer industry. Drywall is a co-product of the fertilizer industry. Bone fractures? No, bone fractures don't happen in water fluoridation. It is a U-shaped curve. At 1 part per million is the lowest. You take it out of the water, you don't quit adding it, it's going to be at 0.2, approximately 0.2 parts per million. Up here, one's down here, 7 parts per million is up here. You're increasing the chances of your family's getting fractured bones by removing it. Bone cancer, no. It doesn't happen from fluoridated water. If bone cancer happened from fluoridated water, people in India would have cancer of their bones all over the place, and they don't. They don't. They don't have any more bone cancer in their growth plates, osteosarcoma is what it's called, than we do. It just doesn't happen from fluoride. IQ and neurodevelopmental issues we're discussing. Thyroid, there are no thyroid issues. This has been studied by boards of scientists in countries. In Ireland, they have to do a study on the health issues only of fluoride because they're mandated. It's a fluoridation mandate in the country. Every few years they do that. There's no health issues, including IQ, from families that are drinking fluoridated water. Court cases, there's been 108 so far since 1945. We just had the 109th one. None of them have resulted in fluoridation being outlawed. None of them, including the current one. There's lots of reasons that people claim issues with it. I don't like it forcing it on me. You're making me drink it. It's a mass medication. It's a medication. On and on. Each one of those have been heard in these court cases, and none of them have been ruled by the courts to be valid. Now, on the current EPA lawsuit that just ended and now is in an appeal, who brought it? Well, they were opponents of fluoridation. Surprise. What did the judge decide? The judge wrote that fluoridated water had an unreasonable risk, but he didn't conclude with certainty that fluoridated water is harmful. Now, there are those that will read you pages and pages or sentences out of that, pluck them out of that ruling. But that's not what the judge said. He didn't rule it out. The National Toxicology Program, which I could talk a lot about, but I'm not going to because it's flawed, and so was their meta-analysis that they put out for scientific reasons that have been brought forward. I really won't go into it, but I'll be happy to do that if you ask me for some extra time to discuss it. The National Toxicology Program was writing about water fluoridation. They said it was a presumed neurotoxin, which they later retracted. They took away that presumption. And they asked the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, hey, please look at this for us. We want you to do our peer review. They're the top peer review group in the United States. So they said yes. They sent them the information that they had for this draft, a monograph is what it was called. Mason looked at it and said, no, you're really not supporting your arguments, but what you have put forth. Take it back. Go write it up again. Well, they did. And then he sent it back to them. There was essentially no changes at all. Mason said to them, really it was a letter report. They had bolding in their letter was just, it was brutal. Basically saying you didn't change anything, and you need to make sure that people who can look at this and say you cannot draw a conclusion that it is in regards to low fluoride levels below 1.5 parts per million, and typically not including, it won't include those that are in levels that are in drinking water. So below 1.5 parts per million, you don't have the information to support what you're saying. Well, what they did, they abandoned the Nason group and they went and hired their own review group. We don't know who they were, but they approved it. Well, it came back to the director of NTP, and he said, we're not releasing this right now. There was a lot more work that had to be done on it, and it still has a lot of issues. Nonetheless, talking about the court case again, 7 years. One of the 7-year itches was that the judge knew there was a National Toxicology Program report coming out. It wasn't presented to him, but he said, I know it's there. He goes, I want to wait until I'll hear what they have to say before I make my conclusion. Well, unfortunately, he got it wrong. And the reason why he got it wrong is he replied on that National Toxicology report, referred to it 120 times in his opinion, 120 times. And he got it wrong because the NTP stated on page II of that report, it's the third page, second in from the cover, and they said it was not about water fluoridation. In fact, this is their statement in that monograph. I didn't bold it, I did highlight the yellow. They bolded that it does not address whether sole exposure to fluoride added to drinking water in some countries like the US and in Canada is associated with any measurable effect on IQ. None. So the judge messed up. Well, leading health experts around the US and around the world, this is not just a US issue, this is looked at everywhere. Other countries here, our American Academy of Pediatrics, Dental Association, American Association for Dental, Neural, and Craniofacial Research, and the American Water Works Association quickly came out and said, this isn't right. Well, my friends that are in Ireland, England, Israel, New Zealand, they shake their heads. They said, Johnny, just get up and say, no other country in the world is stopping fluoridation based over these studies that are being put forth, or the National Toxicology Program, or the court case. We're not stopping it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just an argument that has no basis. But what concerns have been raised about water fluoridation and its safety? Well, do we have studies that are good? Well, we have great studies that have been done. Studies not looking at urine from pregnant mothers that are held in a biobank of tissues, which was never intended to be looked at for fluoride analysis. This is what's called a convenience sample. In Canada, it's called MIRIC, where they took pregnant mothers' urine samples. They agreed to be in this pool of families, pool of mothers, and they took hair, they took blood, they took clippings from their nails, and urine. And they had a urine sample from the first trimester, one spot sample, not 24 hours, a second trimester, and third trimester. In one study that's being talked about tonight, they only were able to use the one from the third trimester because those mothers said that they were actually fasting. They don't know if they were, and the reasons are they didn't do the primary research. They took stuff out of this database, of these biobanks, including IQ studies that were done by research students. This was nothing that they collected themselves. I'm just stating the facts. Australian studies have shown absolutely no effects of water fluoridation and IQ done at appropriate ages. IQ studies that are looked at in 3 to 4-year-olds, which have been done in these studies by the Canadians and now here in the US, you can't do an IQ test on a 3 to 4-year-old. It's invalid. Guth and his group of 31 toxicologists and food experts in Europe said, changes, if you have children, it makes sense. If you have a 3 and a 4-year-old, if you have a young 3-year-old to an old 4-year-old, somebody ready to go to kindergarten, is there a difference? Yeah, it's a huge difference in their IQ. IQ changes rapidly between those ages. But they did not know these, in the Canadian group, they did not know what ages those IQ tests were given. IQ tests that are given in studies like in Australia, Spain, Sweden, and in New Zealand, they know the ages, they know their appropriate ages, and none of those studies have shown that fluoride in level of 0.7 parts per million or in fluoridated water at those levels in 1 part per million have shown any effects whatsoever. The New Zealand study was a 30-year study, 35-year. They took IQ testing on children at young ages multiple times, and then again at age 38, between fluoridated communities and non, about 1,000 people from each. There was no change whatsoever. No changes. These are health research boards, governmental boards, independent boards around the world that have all looked at health issues, and they still say there's none. None. Like I started to say on the National Toxicology Program and on the meta-analysis, let me just say, besides all of the issues that are being brought forward by scientists, including the ones that were brought forward against Rivka Green, who published in the 2019 JAMA Pediatrics on IQ, they never released that data. Dr. Green and Till never released the data that they have. They're funded by NIH, which requires you to release your data. They never did. It's been requested by researchers around the world. They won't release it, and still haven't to this day. Nobody can validate a study or replicate it if you don't know how they did it. NIH requires you to do that, but they are not doing that. Besides that, in the meta-analysis, there were 17 studies that were from the journal Fluoride, which is a journal that the opponents put together to publish studies that would not be published by credible journals. There were another 14 that were in the language, in Chinese language. A few of those was interpreted by the Fluoride Action Network, the group that is opposed to fluoridation. NTP used those interpretations and did not interpret them themselves, and they did not reinterpret or interpret the other studies. If you aren't based in good research, your research is not great. NTP said we have moderate confidence that over 1.5 parts per million that there is an association between IQ and fluoride. That's like me being a pilot and saying halfway over the Pacific, I have moderate confidence that I put enough fuel on board that we can make it to the rest of the way. Okay? These folks from, one of the authors is Anne-Marie Glenny from the Cochrane report, the one that was out in 2024, and the other is from the catfish study, which you may hear about tonight. They wrote about the studies that were included in the NTP. And what they said was, and they included Dr. Till's paper, which you'll hear about tonight, by Dr. Mallon. Did I say it right? Okay, thank you. Johnson's hard to mess up, I apologize. They said that the studies were looked at and judged as being a low risk of bias and high quality by NTP. And that included Dr. Till's paper. But in fact, they were highly biased and of low quality. Everyone around the world is saying that. This is just not this group, but this group, Dr. Glenny and the Cochrane group, are called the gold standard. They are very rigorous in their evaluations of literature. And they specifically said that the MyRic biobank in Canada is not designed to evaluate fluoride. So it's not Johnny Johnson standing up there telling you. I'm repeating what others have said around the world. Okay, just real quickly, let's do a summary bar graph of some studies. I told you about the New Zealand studies. If you look at those in the beginning and at the end, IQs were basically the same, no changes. The Canadian one was Dr. Green, who published in JAMA Pediatrics. What was their objective? Was there an overall difference between fluoridated communities and non-fluoridated communities in these 3 to 4 year olds? They buried it in the table 2, line 11. Those numbers, there's no difference. They never mentioned that. They kept going on a deep sea fishing expedition until they uncovered a subgroup that had some kind of a difference between any boys. In Spain, this was a study that it was done on fluoridated community children from birth. They evaluated them in IQ between fluoridated and unfluoridated communities were the same. Dewey was another one, researcher that looked at the studies, that literature that I'm talking about from Canada. Dewey's IQ came out exactly the same. Nobody's finding anything different. When you look at it appropriately, and Lockdoe from Australia, his 2022 paper is the same as Dr. Mallon's. He had 10 times the number of people participating in it, and he had psychologists that were calibrated, not research assistants that went out from the biobank to take IQ tests. He found no changes whatsoever in IQ. The Cochrane group, what do they have to say? Well, I'm going to tell you, I can talk about for this forever because I know them personally. I met them back in 2015 and we've stayed in contact. What you're going to hear about the small percentage of change is totally inappropriate. When they evaluated their data for how much of a reduction in cavities based on not is there a hole or not a hole, but how many areas on those teeth actually had cavities, it came out the same as what we are seeing in other countries around the world. I think it was 35% for children, and maybe in the 20s or somewhere like that for permanent teeth. And we have papers that we've written on this as well and published. What Anne-Marie Glenny did tell me, she said, Johnny, we're going to include contemporary studies when we come out with a 2024 review. And sure enough, they said they agree that number one, if you have fluoridation in place, don't stop it. And number two, contemporary studies demonstrate fluoridation is effective. I'm going to go real quickly. You're going to hear about fluoridation causing dental fluorosis. That's unsightly. It does not. It's little white spots on the teeth, very mild to mild, and it wears off in just a few years' time, as was shown in a group out of Iowa. And us clinically can tell you it goes away. What do you want? Cavities or little white spots that you can't see on the right? Lastly, I want to bring it home. I looked at your schools here in Bartow, and I looked at them over in Zephyr Hills, your elementary schools, where we should be seeing IQ issues, right? Because you have fluoridated water, and they don't. Jacksonville is fluoridated naturally, which you may not know, at optimal levels. Their heads are not on backwards. They don't have a third eye. Well, here's Bartow's scores from 2014 to now. Bartow scores obviously are much lower than yours. I'm sorry, Bartow's are much higher than Zephyr Hills. Nothing different. These were all, no, they were not charter schools, and they were all Title I schools. They had the same type of population that you do, same type of income that you do here. Okay? So if there was supposed to be some IQ changes, why wouldn't it be there? There's low fluoride levels. It's sad that their grades are worse, but the facts are not showing what you're going to hear tonight. If you had IQ drops, why isn't it showing? We've done this around the country. Similar results. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, really appreciate that. Just a couple of things no, you're good. Polk County Polk County proper, unincorporated, has never fluoridated the water. I found that was interesting. There's only 4 cities right now that are fluoridating. That is us, Auburndale, Haines City, and Lakeland. Since this has come out in September, Winter Haven has stopped and Lake Alfred has stopped. So we have a county of over 800,000 people, and obviously the majority of that is not being fluoridated. So that's just a fact that's where we stand. There was something else. I also wanted to let you know that when we get to public comment, our water plant manager is here. So if you have any questions for him when you come up for your public comment, you'll be able to ask if you'd like to do that. And we'll circle back on that at the end. And now we're going to move into our second 30 minutes. Don't start the clock yet. Wait till I introduce. We have Dr. Joseph Latipo. He is the Florida Surgeon General. And then we have Dr. Ashley Mallon. She is the Assistant Professor, Department of Epidemiology, College of Public Health and Health Professions, and College of Medicine at the University of Florida. And Dr. Griffin Cole, the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. So, Dr. Latipo, welcome and thank you for coming. And let's give a hand to our first 2 panelists, Dr. Johnson and Dr. Slack. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you for inviting me. Mayor, thank you very much. And commissioners, thank you for your interest in this issue and your care for your community. And you guys, this is an awesome showing with everyone out here. I hope people got to see the Little League game that was going on earlier too. This is a beautiful community. I mean, I hadn't been out here before. It's beautiful out here. I will talk briefly, and my colleagues, Dr. Mallon and Dr. Cole, will talk about some of the research. And Dr. Cole, of course, is a practicing dentist, and he'll talk about his dental experience. And, I got to be honest, and I don't mean this personally, but I had a lot of difficulty listening to that last presentation. And I had a lot of difficulty listening to it because I'm very sensitive to, I'll just be honest, dishonesty. And when I say dishonesty, I mean that so we're here, I'm here because I care about your health. That's why I'm here. That's why I go to work. That's why I was a professor at UCLA. I took care of patients there. I was tenured at UCLA. I had, I think, 3 or 4 NIH grants when I left UCLA. And I got a call from the governor's office about taking the Surgeon General position. And I've got a wife and 3 boys, and we were very happy in Los Angeles. And I got this call, and I actually didn't know what to do, but my wife was very clear that I should take the position. And I took the position because I cared deeply about the issues that we were facing as a country and as a world in 2020. We uprooted our lives in Los Angeles and we moved to Florida. And that's why I do this job, because I care deeply about your health and about truth. And I'll be honest, I get physically sick when I'm in the presence of people who are trying to sell you on something, not because they care about you, but they care about the something that they're trying to sell you on. And I've just got to be honest, and that's how I feel right now. I could care less whether the issue is fluoride or something else. The issue that matters is your health, my health, the health of our loved ones, the health of our kids, and how we make the best decisions that we can for them. And, you know, whatever happened in the past, people, yes, fluoridation has been happening for decades in this country. And that's, you know, fine. So people made decisions for whatever reasons that they thought were best. But at this point in time, that is not the right decision. That's the wrong decision. It's the wrong decision for health, because very plain and simple, without any of the, you know, the long stories and the twists and the turns and the inside information and the, you know, the gallantry and this and that, the bottom line is that you now have multiple studies, the vast majority of studies, that show very clearly an association between higher fluoride levels and neurotoxic harms, neuropsychiatric harms, lower IQ, more ADHD, you know, more behavioral problems, more problems with executive function. And what populations are most sensitive? Children and pregnant moms. Like, what more do you need to know that you should take an action? I mean, what has to happen for you to know that that's not right? And, you know, we talk about risks and benefits. Sure, dental health, very important. Fortunately, there are alternatives, right? There's toothpaste, there's mouthwash. This isn't expensive stuff. I mean, this is stuff that people of all income levels can afford, right? I mean, that is not an issue in this day and age. These things are widely available. They're inexpensive. That is an effective alternative. So, considering what's at stake and what we know now from the science, this is not complicated. The only way I can make it complicated is if I tell you a long-winded story and tell you to look over here and look over there, and, you know, this is the reason that happened, and spin you this yarn. That's how I can make it complicated. This is a very simple issue. The cost in terms of human health is far too high to be fooling around with this. I mean, it actually is reckless for anyone who's knowledgeable to have the information and to continue doing it. It's very simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. The complexity is the friend of people who don't want you to think with your brain and think with your intuition and just think with common sense. Complexity is their friend. This is a simple issue. I mean, we've had much more complex issues in the past, and there will be more complex issues in the future. But this is a very simple one. So at this point, I'm going to stop and let Dr. Mallon walk you through the research in an unbiased fashion, so that you can be informed and make a decision.
The clock is still going, so I'm going to be mindful of that. Thank you so much for having me here today. Today I'll be presenting the current state of the science on fluoride exposure and neurodevelopment.
Okay, come a little closer.
Okay.
There you go.
Right in there, okay. Thank you.
You gotta breathe that microphone in.
Okay, I don't have any conflicts of interest or disclosures related to the material. And so there's been a lot of discussion about the impacts of fluoride exposure on the brain, the developing brain recently. But this is not a new topic. There has been evidence of developmental neurotoxicity of fluoride in animal studies now for decades. This study by Molyneux and colleagues was published in 1995, a well-conducted study in a respectable journal, which to my knowledge has not been debunked, even though some people may disagree with it. The study found that rats that were exposed to sodium fluoride, which is an additive in the community drinking water as well, exhibited more symptoms of ADHD. And the exposure levels in this study, they were higher than what we would typically encounter in community drinking water. On the human side of things, there were also studies conducted in other countries that showed that high fluoride exposure was associated with reduced child IQ. There's 27 studies that were reviewed in this meta-analysis published by researchers at Harvard School of Public Health, and the authors concluded that the results support the possibility of an adverse effect of high fluoride exposure on children's neurodevelopment. But what about low exposures? So I published the first study to examine associations of fluoride with low exposures of fluoride with neurodevelopment. We examined state prevalence of community fluoridation in relation to prevalence of ADHD among children and adolescents in the United States. We found that parents reported higher rates of medically diagnosed ADHD in their children in states in which a greater proportion of people receive fluoridated water from public water supplies. This was an ecological study, so our main conclusion was that someone should probably look into this. In the years following, there were several rigorously conducted prospective pregnancy and birth cohort studies based in Canada and Mexico that also found associations of prenatal fluoride exposure with poorer, worse child neurodevelopment. So this study was published in the Element cohort based in Mexico City. They found that each 0.5 milligram per liter increase in maternal urinary fluoride averaged across pregnancy was associated with a 2.5 point IQ reduction in the children at ages 6 to 12. They also published a subsequent study that found that higher prenatal fluoride exposure was associated with more symptoms of ADHD in those same children. There was a nationally representative study published in a Canadian cohort called the MIRIC cohort that found that each 1 milligram per liter increase in maternal urinary fluoride averaged across pregnancy was associated with a 4.5 point IQ reduction in the boys. And when they looked at fluoride intake from drinking water and tea and other sources, they found that a 1 milligram increase in fluoride intake per day was associated with around a 3.7 point IQ reduction in the children between the ages of 3 and 4. So one of the questions that was raised from those studies is whether the exposure levels in Canada and Mexico are comparable to pregnant women living in the United States. I led a study that was published in 2023 that examined urinary fluoride levels among pregnant women in Los Angeles County, and we did indeed find that their urinary fluoride levels were nearly identical to those of the Canadian pregnant women in fluoridated communities, as well as the pregnant women living in Mexico City. So very comparable exposure levels. Here are 5 other studies that found that higher prenatal fluoride exposure was associated with a worse child neurodevelopment in the realms of overall cognitive development in toddlers. So these first 2 studies, they looked at either urinary fluoride or dietary fluoride and did still find that inverse association. This one looked at drinking water in Canada and found that exposure to the current recommended level during pregnancy was associated with worse child executive function in Canada. And then these 2 looked at domain-specific effects of fluoride exposure. So they were able to determine that nonverbal intelligence is likely most associated or impacted by prenatal fluoride exposure, and that boys may be most susceptible to prenatal fluoride exposure, whereas girls may be most susceptible to decrements in nonverbal intelligence from infant exposures. One thing to keep in mind is that these studies used various metrics of exposure assessment, so urinary fluoride, water fluoride, dietary fluoride intake, and findings are consistent regardless of which measure of exposure assessment was implemented. So what about infant exposures? I talked a lot about prenatal, but this study looked at fluoride exposure from infant formula and child IQ in a Canadian birth cohort. They found that an increase of 0.5 milligrams per liter in water fluoride concentration, which is roughly the difference between a fluoridated and non-fluoridated community, in infancy was associated with approximately a 9-point decrement in performance IQ among the formula-fed children and a 6-point decrement in performance IQ among the breastfed children. So as was previously mentioned, the National Toxicology Program did publish their long-awaited comprehensive systematic review of all of the studies on fluoride and neurodevelopment and neurocognitive outcomes, published up until 2023. They identified 72 studies in total on fluoride exposure and IQ, and reported that 64 found an inverse association, meaning that higher fluoride exposure was associated with lower child IQ in 64 studies. When they only looked at the studies that they deemed to be high quality at low risk of bias, they identified 19. 18 found an inverse association, such that higher fluoride exposure was associated with lower child IQ. The report concluded there is moderate confidence in the body of evidence that estimated fluoride exposure is inversely associated with IQ in children, and they determined that this applies at a minimum to those living in areas where fluoride in drinking water is known to be at or above 1.5 milligrams per liter. They said that associations between drinking water fluoride levels below 1.5 milligrams per liter and children's IQ remain unclear, so they may impact IQ, they may not, they don't know. However, it's plausible that pregnant women and children living in optimally fluoridated communities could have a total fluoride intake at or above the level of those living in a community with a water fluoride level of 1.5 milligrams per liter or higher. Basically, this is because there's individual differences in fluoride consumption patterns. Community drinking water is not the only source of fluoride exposure, but all of the foods and beverages that are reconstituted with it will then contain fluoride, and we consume those to varying degrees. There's also fluoride in tea and other things, so of course dental products. So we have exposure from different sources, and looking just at a community fluoridation level is not going to capture those differences. The NTP also published a meta-analysis that was related to their NTP report. And interestingly, the findings of the meta-analysis showed that urinary fluoride concentrations below 1.5 milligrams per liter are consistently inversely associated with child IQ. That's when considering all studies or only those deemed to be at low risk of bias. And the findings also showed that a dose-response relationship between higher fluoride exposure and lower child IQ exists. And the NTP report highlighted a need for more US-based studies on fluoride and neurodevelopment. I led the first US-based study that was published in JAMA Network Open last May. We found that higher prenatal fluoride exposure was associated with more neurobehavioral problems in the children by age 3. So things like anxiety, emotion dysregulation, stomach aches, headaches of no known medical origin, and symptoms of autism. In particular, we found that pregnant women whose urinary fluoride levels were approximately 1.2 milligrams per liter, so again below 1.5 milligrams per liter, had children with nearly double the odds of exhibiting clinically relevant neurobehavioral problems by age 3 when compared with pregnant women whose urinary fluoride levels were approximately 0.5 milligrams per liter. There are several mechanisms by which fluoride can exert neurotoxic effects on the developing brain. So fluoride has been shown to readily cross the placenta in animal and even in human studies. It accumulates in brain regions implicated in learning, memory, mood, attention, and executive function. Neurochemically, it alters cholinergic activity, which is important for attentional processes as well as learning and memory. It acts on the alpha-4 and alpha-7 cholinergic subunit receptors, which are also implicated in ADHD. It has been shown to alter glutamate metabolism as well as contribute to mitochondrial dysfunction and increase oxidative stress, which can contribute to cellular damage and cellular death. So although these are observational studies and we're observing associations in them, there are certain criteria that epidemiologists refer to when we're trying to determine if the associations that we are observing are causal. And the literature on fluoride exposure and neurodevelopment satisfies most of them. So we see strong magnitudes or large magnitudes of association. We see consistency across the body of literature. The exposures are being assessed before the outcomes. So these are prospective studies. We're assessing fluoride exposure in pregnancy or infancy. As I said, biological plausibility is quite clear from the animal studies. Yes, a dose-response relationship has been identified, and there's coherence across human studies, animal studies, the entire literature. We have experimental evidence from animal studies, but it would likely not be ethical to conduct a randomized controlled trial in humans now. It would probably not pass the IRB, given what we now know about impacts of fluoride on the developing brain. So there was a recent federal ruling, as we've discussed, that determined the level presently considered optimal in the United States poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children, and that there's a high level of certainty that a hazard is present. Fluoride is associated with reduced IQ. So really, the federal ruling implies there is not enough of a margin of safety between the hazard that was identified in the NTP report at being 1.5 milligrams per liter and the exposure in community drinking water for dental caries prevention, which is 0.7 milligrams per liter. The EPA's default is for there to be at least a factor of 10 between the hazard and the exposure level, which would mean that the fluoride concentration in drinking water would need to be 0.15 milligrams per liter or lower to provide enough of a margin of safety to protect child IQ. Although if the hazard exists below 1.5, as we've seen in the studies that I presented today, there would be no margin that would be safe for the developing brain. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mallon, and next we have Dr. Griffin Cole. Welcome.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay. So this first slide, I think will end this entire argument in 15 seconds. This is the oral health director of the CDC being deposed by Attorney Michael Conant in this court case that you've heard about twice tonight. This is just 15 seconds. The sound is going to come from me. Words are on the screen as well. I got it here. Press that advanced button and I press mine. I'll tell you when you're ready.
Is the CDC aware of any evidence demonstrating benefits from consumption of fluoridated drinking water during the first 6 months of life? We are not aware of any evidence.
He also answered that same question for toddlers and children. CDC not aware of any evidence of any benefit from fluoridated water. This is arguably the largest proponents and supporters of water fluoridation. Okay. So you can also go to the CDC's website when it's up, and you can look at their oral health survey, and they'll show each state, and they look at third graders because that's about the right age, 8 and 9, to compare between water fluoridation and actual decay rates. Look at the top there. 2 of the least fluoridated in the entire country. New Hampshire has a 35% decay rate, and Vermont a 37%. Look at the highest fluoridated ones. Washington, D.C., 100% fluoridated, 60% decay rate. Kentucky, almost 100%, 60% decay rate. North Dakota, 96% fluoridated, 68% decay rate. You can look at all 50 states. I think Florida, the last time I checked, is about a 45.5% decay rate. There has never been a double-blinded, randomized clinical trial to prove that fluoridation actually works or is safe. This is the gold standard. It's never been done. There's never been a long-term follow-up study to prove that it actually worked. There's been plenty that have shown that it failed. And one that I'm very intimate with is my hometown of San Antonio, Texas. They started fluoridating in the year 2000. 9 years later, their Metro Health Department actually did do a follow-up study, and they looked at the most indigent parts of San Antonio, because that's who we're supposed to be helping, right? The ones who don't have access to good dental care. Well, after $3 million in 9 years, there wasn't a decrease in decay, there was an increase of 13%. Now, fluoridation didn't cause the increase, but the point is, it didn't do its intended function. Oh, let's go back. Silicofluorides, because we heard twice tonight, I think, that fluoride is fluoride, and that's just not true. Silicofluorides have never been FDA approved for ingestion, and they were never proven safe prior to actually putting in our water supply. And silicofluorides are not the same thing as calcium fluoride. Okay, and this was proven by Johannes Westendorf in 1975. He was doing a study on this for his dissertation. Not only did he show an incomplete dissociation of silicofluorides under normal conditions, but he also showed that it blocked acetylcholinesterase, a critical enzyme for the regulation of our neurotransmitters. So even in 1975, we saw that there was an issue with the brain. We showed this earlier here. This is the Calgary study, and I was very proud that we actually saw the entire slide going back to 2005. Notice it's very linear. It wasn't going up in this abrupt increase after fluoridation ended. That's not true. It was going up in a very linear pattern. And there's the study that was quoted on there. So that's the study there from Lindsay McLaren. But I want to show you a graph from that actual study, and I highlighted in yellow for you. Calgary 13-14, 6.4 mean decayed, extracted, filled teeth. That's how they did it. 6.4 was the mean in Calgary. It was 6.6 in Edmonton. Now, if you look carefully, because I don't want to leave anything out, what they're bragging about here is that in 2004 and 5, it went from 2.6 up to 6.4. So that's a change of 3.8. Whereas Edmonton only went up a change of 2.1. Bottom line, Edmonton has been fluoridated since 1967. Why is it higher anyway? There's no correlation. And this is an actual quote from the lead author when she was doing a commentary about the study, which happens often. Quote, in terms of permanent teeth, Carrie's experience actually decreased in Calgary during the time frame of the study. What about bottle-fed babies? This is what we're talking about. This is what Joe talked about. This is what Ashley talked about. What we all talk about here, right? There's no dose control. Mother's milk has 0.004 parts per million of fluoride. A bottle-fed baby, what's the major ingredient in their diet? It's water, and oftentimes tap water. And that baby's going to ingest way more for his or her weight than we will. As will athletes who drink a lot of water, as will outdoor workers. So they're going to get much more than 0.7 milligrams per liter. You cannot control the dosage. Okay, the Cochrane collaboration, it was mentioned earlier as the gold standard, and I would agree. Whenever we hear that there's a 25% reduction in decay, because we hear that a lot, right? That's the argument. That came from the 2015 Cochrane review. And if you look at that review and actually read it in detail, they went all the way back to studies dating to 1946. In this one, which just came out a few months ago in October, they said, you know what? We found that the studies prior to the early 70s were of lower quality, and 80% of all the pro-fluoridation studies came prior to that year, going back again to the 40s and 50s. What did we not have in those early years? There was no fluoride in toothpaste. Once we got the fluoride in toothpaste, we can now make the argument that we don't need to put it in the water. And look what their results came out this time. And by the way, when they went back to look at the studies, and they only went back to the early 70s this time, they could only find acceptable quality studies, 22 children's studies. That's it. Not these thousands and thousands you hear about, and none for adults. Average benefit now, 1/4 of one tooth. That's it. It's insignificant. It's like 2%. Here's some quotes from that actual one. We could not be sure whether adding fluoride to water reduced tooth decay in children's permanent teeth, end quote. Quote, we were unsure whether there were any effects on tooth decay when fluoride is removed from a water supply. And as it was mentioned earlier, the Catfish study, which was done in England, it was a 10-year study on children, it found a reduction of only 0.16 decayed teeth, and here's the graph that they showed in the study. So your x-axis is the years, your y-axis is fewer cavities, and if you look back, sure enough, in the early 70s, maybe four cavities per kid. But look, as we get down to where we are now, it's insignificant. It's nearly zero. This is a study that probably nobody really even knows about. It took me years to actually find this because there's multiple studies that are under the umbrella, the Iowa study. But this, they followed children from birth, some up to age 27 and a half. But in this particular one that I'm showing you here in 2009, funded by the National Institutes of Health, they followed children from birth to age 17. And they did exams on their teeth, they did some dietary assessments, detailed intake questionnaires. The result from the 2009, this particular study, which is the one I'll show you on this next slide, no significant correlation between ingested fluoride and cavity reduction. They looked at everything, bone scans, everything. We're talking about decay here. No significant reduction in cavities. That's the actual study if you'd like to look it up. Again, this is one of, I think there's, I don't know, actually 10 maybe now that they've done. Mostly the same authors, but other ones as well, to look at all different aspects of what happens when you follow someone from birth to at least age 17. And the Lotus study, this was the adult sister study to catfish, also in England, 10-year cohort study, the largest one ever conducted, right? 6.4 million adults, largest study ever. Here's the results. 2% fewer cavities, just like the catfish one. No reductions despite social inequalities. It didn't matter whether you were poor or wealthy or could afford everything to do. They all brushed about the same. No reductions in missing teeth. And lastly, that fluoridation is likely a net economic loss when capital costs are included. So it's time to end this experiment. Okay, 95% of the world does not fluoridate. Only 5% does. Of the 5%, there's 11 countries that provide fluoride to over half of their populace. And of all those countries, the USA provides water fluoridation to human beings more than the rest of the world combined. And yet look at that graph to your right there. That's from the World Health Organization. That is showing fluoridated countries versus non-fluoridated and how decay rates have gone down consistently worldwide. You can't tell me which are fluoridated and which aren't. So, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, you can see this is a lot of information to take in. Thank you, panel. I'm going to thank you for coming. Well, you're not done yet, but it's a kind of a mind blower. I do want to say that we didn't start fluoridating the water here till 2004. I grew up here. It was unfluoridated, and so I didn't even know that, but I didn't even know when we started, but it's only been about 21 years, right? Yeah, 24, yeah, doing my math, yeah. So just wanted you to know that. Okay, commissioners, it says here that we have commission comments. Do you have any comments? Are you good? You want to move on? Are we good down here? Okay, all right, so, yeah, okay, we'll come back after public comment. Now here's how the public comment is going to work. If you would like to speak, you need to fill out a form, which is over on the table. And then you can come to this mic, or you can come to the podium mic, whichever you're comfortable. So if you are ready, we will start with speakers. I will comment. Oh, you got it? Oh, good. Okay. Well, that's real organized. We haven't done that before.
We haven't heard this thing.
Okay.
The first one is Justin Harvey.
Here he comes. So Jackie, just for order to expedite, they will get it over there and they'll bring it to you. Is that what you want them to do? But there's people still that just came in. Okay, good. All right, we got some organization here. That's good. Thank you very much. And you want them to still state their name and all of that, even though you have the paper, Jackie? For the record? Okay, yes. Okay, so you'll still state your name and your address when you come up. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Justin Harvey. I live at 103 South Osceola, Orlando. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for revisiting this important topic and being open to new science and evolving information. This new information that we just heard from everyone, I know is a lot to take in, and you're actually going to hear plenty of studies and opinions from both sides. But I think the crux of the issue is that you really just can't force a medication on people. I think that ends up being the bottom line. We've seen 74 studies published in JAMA just last month, so it's kind of concerning when people say that, you know, we're just cherry picking. If there's 74 studies in JAMA, Dr. Mallon's work, what Dr. Latipos cited in the state guidance, if just a fraction of that is possibly true, we can't force that on people if there's potential harm. We have documented risks, so we must give people a choice whether they consume this drug. And yes, the FDA does classify it as a drug. Now let's assume fluoride is perfectly safe. It's the best thing since sliced bread. There's not 70 studies on lower IQ. I can't opt out of this medical treatment. I can opt out of any medical treatment if the doctor gives me something. I can go home and choose whether I want to do it or not, how much. I can't, this comes out of the faucet. And I just don't think that's right for people. You can't control the dose to an infant, an elderly person, someone with a kidney condition. It's just, we don't add statins or antidepressants to the water, right? That would be crazy. So I don't think we should be adding any medication to the water. We also have to remember it is not naturally occurring fluoride. I don't know how many times I have to say this, the news always reports it, it's a common misconception. It is a chemical waste from the phosphate plants. It comes from the smokestacks, and they found a creative way to make it into a fluoridating agent and add it to our water. It eats through steel, glass, and concrete. Your material safety data sheet will clearly list it as poison. I personally do not consent to drinking that stuff. I mean, maybe it's great for the front of my teeth, but it's leaching to my organs, going to my brain. That's nuts. That's just nuts in my opinion. What happens when we stop? Well, nothing. That's the great news. 95% of the world doesn't fluoridate, no dental crisis. 40 counties in Florida don't fluoridate, no dental crisis. And no one can name them because we really don't even know. I mean, I have people contact me and say, how do we get the fluoride out of my county? I'm like, it's never been fluoridated. They're like, oh, well, my teeth are great. That's great. So don't let people scare you with the baseless idea that the sky will fall or teeth will rot if we stop this practice. If there maybe are benefits, again, we shouldn't be ingesting it. When we know better, we do better. Lead, arsenic, DDT, PCBs, Agent Orange, aspartame, I mean, I guess I could keep going. But when the risks outweigh the benefits, we've got to protect the most vulnerable, pregnant women and children, as the federal judge has cited. Ending fluoridation is a win-win for all sides. The city saves money, the utility director doesn't have to handle a corrosive chemical waste, the public isn't forced to medication, and the people that want it can get it in a multitude of ways, which is why we started in the first place, so there's no reason to do it now. I'm personally tired of spending money on expensive filtration. I carry this water bottle around everywhere I go. I avoid the public parks water for my dog and my kid, and it shouldn't be that way. So please give people a choice, and thank you so much for bringing this up.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Chris Russell.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, ma'am. My name's Chris Russell, 1831 Northeast 6th Terrace, Gainesville, Florida.
Okay, good. Pull that a little closer, or just get closer to it.
Chris Russell,
There you
Gainesville,
go.
Florida. I'm a dual A licensed operator. I've been treating water in Florida for over 20 years. So I'd like to just bring a different perspective to this from a municipal, say, regulatory perspective. From a regulatory perspective, fluoridation does not fall under treatment at all. Never has. It's an additive. The only treatment required in Florida is chlorine to deactivate bacteria in the water. So when you sit back and you think about fluoridation, you think about the history. We started fluoridating, somebody made that decision. All right, was that an informed decision or was it an adopted one? They started fluoridating water in Gainesville in 1946. Still do it today. I've spoke to the council there. I continue to speak to them because this is something that I'm passionate about. I became an operator in Florida to protect our public. Right? That's what I do in water treatment and wastewater. I protect our environment. As Dr. Lapo eloquently said, this is a very simple thing. From a municipal perspective, it's wasteful spending. We don't need to do it. Under Florida law, it's not required. You know, your water treatment plant manager recommends that it's not necessary as a hazard. Hydrofluorosilicic acid, I've been in the industry for 20 years. It terrifies me. And I've worked with very nasty chemicals. It will kill you quickly. So it's something like, why do we even have it there? I've been with the city of Stark now for 2 years. And it took me all of about 3 minutes to explain to them the hazards far outweighing the benefits of fluoridating water. We've got too many natural sources. I mean, I appreciate our dentists coming up here, you know, in support of it. I'm not going to stand here and tell a dentist how to fix a decayed tooth. I would appreciate that they don't tell me how to treat water, because that's what I do for a living. That's what I've done for 2 decades. There's a warning label on toothpaste. If you ingest it, call poison control immediately. I would ask, where is the warning label on potable water? We've got averages for the city of Bartow. All those highlighted numbers exceed 0.7 milligrams per liter. The orange ones, that's 0.8 milligrams per liter. We can go back historically. I've got some that are 0.9 milligrams per liter. Your natural source coming out of the groundwater is 0.3. So I say, why do we even need to add it? It's an added cost, and it's an added risk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Schrader.
Richard Schroeder, medical doctor, former practicing obstetrician, Naples, Florida. So what is fluorine? Let's just talk about that a minute. Fluorine, from which the fluoride is derived, is found in fluorspar, cryolite, fluoroapatite. This is the 9th element in the periodic table. It's a member of the halogen family and the 13th most abundant element in the earth. It's the most reactive of all the non-metal elements. In its free state, fluorine is highly toxic, pale yellow gas, as you've just heard. As a matter of fact, several scientists who attempted to isolate elemental fluorine were killed during their experimentation and are now known as the fluorine martyrs. In 1886, Dr. Henri Moissan successfully isolated it, and that paved the way for human experimentation and eventual utilization in a number of industrial activities. Fluoride, that's F with a little dash E, and the negative ion is the chemical ion of fluorine that contains an extra electron, forming strong electronegative bonds with other chemicals. It is particularly attracted to calcium and magnesium. So fluorine, when it's given to children and babies, bonds very strongly to infant bones, and then as we age, and we've heard this from others, it leaches out and migrates to the brain, and it can cause osteoporosis, and also a lot of thought now about its contribution to Alzheimer's disease. So in addition to all sorts of water and dental products, fluoride is found in tons of stuff, but one I want to concentrate on is drugs, medical drugs, antibiotics, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory agents, and drugs used to induce general anesthesia, psychopharmaceuticals, and of course the phosphate fertilizers. And since 80% of Americans are on some kind of pharmaceutical drug at any given time in this country, so much of this fluoride that's in the drugs, in addition to the drug, gets its way back into the water supply. So trust me, we get lots of fluoride without adding it to the drinking water if you think it's of any benefit at all. But as a matter of fact, fluoride is not essential for human growth and development. In fact, it's not required for any physiological process in the body. Consequently, no one will suffer from a lack of fluoride. We get fluoride and fluorinated chemicals from so many sources. Even if it had a health benefit, it can't be added to something like a public water supply where each individual's intake is different. It simply cannot be dosed properly. And our first obligation is to do no harm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Kiley.
It's the right height. Good evening, my name is Scott Kiley, and I'm with Stand for Health Freedom and a citizen of fluoride-free Collier County. When we consult with a doctor, we expect honesty by way of informed consent. This includes the full risk-benefit analysis. If you find out that your doctor is omitting critical information, either intentionally or out of ignorance, it is definitely time to find a new doctor. Now let's review omissions from the pro-fluoride doctors that they conveniently leave out. Number one, the CDC's Oral Health Director, Casey Hannon, only when forced under oath, he stated, "We do not promote fluoride use for in utero benefit. Babies in utero, no fluoride," right? Of course not. The neurotoxin added to the water crosses the placenta and the blood-brain barrier of the fetus. Pro-fluoridation doctors leave this part out. Number two, the CDC's oral health director states under oath, there is no benefit for newborns to ingest fluoride up to 6 months of age. Well, of course not. They have no teeth. They have no teeth. I ask, how can we force this on mothers and their babies? From conception to 6 months of age, during the first 15 months, water fluoridation poisons these helpless humans when their developing brain is most vulnerable. The CDC, the EPA, the NSF acknowledges under oath they do not know the upper safe limit of fluoride. 0.7 parts per million is a guess. They are guessing at our health. Doctors for water fluoridation who leave these details out have violated their medical oath and must be discredited. Let's discuss the American Dental Association. The ADA supported and allowed the use of lead, arsenic, cocaine, opium, radium, mercury, and formaldehyde in dental care. Today, the ADA still defends the use of mercury amalgams for dental fillings. Who would trust the ADA or the CDC or any doctor that leaves these details out? These agencies, when they are horrifically wrong, to protect their reputation and funding, they will not come clean. We must act to protect our citizens. City Commissioners, RFK Jr.'s position and Dr. Latipo's position against fluoride is clear. Operate with an abundance of caution, please. Please protect your citizens and vote to pause water fluoridation immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill Kiley.
Move this down. My name is Jill Kiley, Collier County. I'm with Stand for Health Freedom. One of the main arguments made by pro-fluoridation advocates is that without fluoridation in the water, lower income and disenfranchised individuals will suffer from increased tooth decay. But the data does not support this. If this were true, we would see an epidemic of tooth decay in unfluoridated nations. Instead, we see over 5 decades of steady decline in dental decay across all nations, fluoridated and unfluoridated alike. It's not the fluoride. We all recognize the importance of a social safety net, one that genuinely supports those in need, whether they are low income, minorities, disabled, or part of a disenfranchised community. Does public water fluoridation help? Too often, well-intended programs lead to unintended consequences, doing more harm than good. That's exactly what we see here with water fluoridation. The greatest support we can provide to underserved populations is the opportunity to develop intelligence. Education, knowledge, and cognitive ability are key factors in breaking the cycle of poverty. Yet, fluoride exposure has been linked to lower IQ, working against the very people we claim to help. America faces a severe health crisis driven by chemical exposures, toxins, pesticides, and processed foods. Adding toxic fluorosilicic acid to our water only worsens this decline. If we truly want to help disadvantaged communities, we must enact policies that protect and enhance health, not compromise it. Water fluoridation may have started with good intentions, but like many outdated medical interventions, it lacked credible, long-term studies. The public has been treated as test subjects. Now with new research exposing serious risks, we must act now. If the city of Bartow fully educated its citizens on the latest scientific findings, mothers and children would overwhelmingly support ending fluoridation. Brain function and overall health must take priority, especially when safe topical fluoride products are available for those who choose to use them. The solution is clear. Remove toxic fluorosilicic acid from our water. Redirect funds toward community education, proper dental care, and safe fluoride options for those who want them. General Latipo and many voices here tonight, along with RFK Jr., have issued clear warnings. It's time for us to listen. Pause water fluoridation immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marsha Brooks.
Good evening, Marsha Brooks, South 1st Avenue in Bartow. I am just a mom. I'm just a mom. I'm here as a mom.
Yay, you're a mom.
Yeah, and I have to buy special filtration for my house. Let me start by saying, and I meant to start with this, is to add fluoride to our water says that God got it wrong, and God didn't get it wrong, okay? We don't have to add fluoride to our water. Put it in your toothpaste if you want it, do what you want, but it should be a choice. I should be able to choose if I want to or not. I did a study in my household when I was young and dumb, and I would use the fluoridated toothpaste. My children, both twins, both 22, each got a cavity. When we stopped there, that was what? They were both, one was 8 and one was 9 when they got their cavities. They're now 22, they have not had a cavity since, okay? No fluoride. Little quick history lesson. I think the commissioners all have this in their paperwork, but history lesson for you all. And how did we even start adding it? Alcoa. I think a lot of you probably know Alcoa. Okay. The founder of Alcoa, Andrew Mellon, was also the founder of the Mellon Institute. And guess who gave us the data and safety information on fluoride? Yeah, you guessed it, the Mellon Institute. Isn't that just convenient? Sorry, but safety, what is it? Safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, right? Everything's safe and effective. Fluoride is not safe and effective. So the countries, the other countries that were mentioned earlier tonight, I think they were mostly Australia, New Zealand, of course, the great Europe, as far as, not Europe, England, and those, there were also the same countries that highly took that jab that just came around, right? Just saying, safe and effective. So countries that didn't take the jab, Norway, Japan, Belgium, Germany, yeah, they were offered it if they wanted to, but look at the statistics of Japan. They did not take the jab at all, okay? They didn't take it at all. They also don't fluorinate, okay? So there's a correlation with our government and keeping us safe is giving us the right to choose. I chose not to put the jab into my body. I choose not to fluorinate my children, my household. I just think that it should be a choice. You 5 are wonderfully elected people, but you should not dictate whether or not I have to take a shower in it. And that's just my personal opinion. Last but not least, oh God, can I get 3 more minutes? And I don't necessarily have to, but I just wanted to also thank the panel, all of you, for being here and our little burb of Bartow. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Jackie, how many do you have over here? Huh? How many do you have? It doesn't look like you have that many, which is good. I've also, you know. Oh, good. Okay, that's more than I thought. Okay, keep going.
Joshua Eckert.
My name is Joshua Eckert. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Bartow and a Class A water treatment operator. I'm well aware of the safety concerns that Mr. Martinez raised in his letter to you. Hydrofluoric acid is one of the most hazardous chemicals a water treatment plant operator has to handle. At my current employer, we choose not to, for this very reason. I'm sorry, I'm not a public speaker.
That's okay, you're doing just fine, don't worry.
You've undoubtedly heard arguments both for and against this chemical,
But for the primary concern, your primary concern should be safety for both your employees and your citizens of Bartow. As water professionals, we must comply with strict regulations and new ones that continue to emerge as scientific studies uncover risks that were previously unaware. Right now, research is underway suggesting potential negative health effects associated with fluoride exposure. While I cannot speak to the medical side of this debate, I do know that water regulations are more stringent now than they were a decade ago. It is entirely possible that future fluoride regulations could further restrict or even prohibit its use. With that in mind, I strongly believe adding this unnecessary chemical to our drinking water is not in the best interest of our community, given its safety risks to both operators and the public. I urge you to reconsider its use for your family and mine. Thank you.
Thank you, you did good. And I just want to refer back to what he was speaking about. Our water plant manager, Tony Martinez, on November the 19th sent a letter to our city manager requesting that we cease putting fluoride in the water. And then he came to the December 2nd commission meeting and he read his letter and his concerns. So we are well aware of that. And if you want a copy of that letter, you can get it from the city clerk, or there's some over there on the table.
SL Frisbee.
Jackie, can you get closer to the microphone too?
SL Frisbee.
Oh, SL. Okay, I didn't hear who you said. Okay, I thought you said that. Of course, of course. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. You can sit back down, SL. Okay, wherever you're comfortable.
Good evening. I am, as previously introduced, S.L. Frisbee, but I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking on behalf of my daughter, Carolyn Holton, who is at a church board meeting tonight. And so this statement is from her. I think it's great that we're considering how to make the best decision about our water to keep Bartowans healthy. Some people have suggested that we do what celebrities tell us, or they are scared of people saying fluoride is an industrial byproduct. Oxygen is sometimes an industrial byproduct too. I think a better way to make decisions than inflammatory labels or asking partisans is to look at the science. I am a PhD data geek. Here's what I have learned. First, on whether fluoride in water is safe. Scientists who reviewed all the existing research, regardless of whether or not it supported adding fluoride to water, have produced meta-analyses that let us draw reliable conclusions from all the studies as a group, rather than over-relying on particular ones. Nature, one of the top science journals, reports in a 2021 meta-analysis that looked at the potential for neurological harm. No study that stayed in the recommended fluoridation guidelines found any harm at all. Zero harm. A 2023 meta-analysis looked specifically at IQ associated with different levels of community water fluoridation. It found conclusively that fluoridation does not cause lower IQ. Bartow's level of fluoridation is well within the safe range. There is low quality evidence that very high levels of fluoridation might cause harm.
One study reviewed all the research that found harm at high levels of fluoridation, and it found that those studies were, quote, at high risk of bias. Sticking to the guideline, I'm glad that Bartow is not considering going beyond the recommended range where junk research says there might be harm. Sticking to the guidelines is safe and very beneficial. There are also studies that show harm when communities stop fluoridation. Children who don't receive fluoride via the community water supply while their adult teeth are forming are at risk of triple the rate of tooth decay. Those of us who have had the benefit of while our teeth were forming might seem something more than a 25% increase if we stop getting fluoride from our water. When tooth decay rises, kids miss more school and employees miss more work. The costs of our dental care rise. Bartowans deserve better than the harm that stopping fluoridation would cause. Please don't allow activists and partisans to pull the wool over your eyes. Meta-analyses that take a second look, even in studies that disagree with the majority.
SL, are you about done? Are you close?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, are you about done?
I'm about done.
Okay.
Sorry, when I rehearsed it, I talked faster. Meta-analyses that take a second look, even at studies that disagree with the majority, tell us that Bartowans benefit with less tooth decay, lower costs, less missed school, and less time off work, all without the risk of neurological harm or lower IQ or any other adverse effects when our water is fluoridated at the recommended level.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, SL.
Dr. Jeffrey Brentel.
There you go.
All right. Well, before I start, I just want to say thank you for the panel for coming out. I sense passion in everyone who's speaking. Everyone's passionate. That's what makes this civil... Oh, sorry. Should I start again? Or... All right. I just want to say thank everyone for coming out tonight. Okay? This shows civil governance in its highest form. So thank you very much. Okay? Thank you. So good evening, City Council. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Rentel, and I am a board-certified oral maxillofacial surgeon here in Polk County. I'm also the president of the Polk County Dental Society, and I'm here today because I am concerned resident and I want to be an advocate for my current and future patients. For decades, water fluoridation has stood as one of the most effective, I believe to be effective, public health interventions in the same manner as adding iodine to salt, vitamin D to milk. By carefully adjusting the fluoride recommendations to approximately 0.7 milligrams per liter, fluoride, I believe, is shown to be safe and effective. And we have been able to dramatically reduce the prevalence of dental decay in our communities. Although, yes, at higher levels of fluoridation, I am sure there may be unwanted side effects, but these effects should not be allowed to be used as possibly confirmatory bias for social, academic, or any political goals. Research from reputable organizations such as the CDC, the American Dental Association, consistently state that fluoridated water can reduce tooth decay for approximately decrease tooth decay for approximately 25% of children and adults alike. Approximately 3% of all ER visits in this country are due to dental-related issues. I'm sure many believe that dental pain, decay, abscesses appear to be benign in nature. But I'm here to tell you that significant dental disease can lead to maladies such as chronic inflammation, sepsis, endocarditis, facial space abscesses that might require urgent to emergent surgical interventions, osteomyelitis, respiratory infections, and possibly cause difficulty in controlling one's blood sugar as being a diabetic. Let's remember when patients require preoperative evaluations for cardiac valve replacements or organ transplants, an evaluation of the oral cavity is done to relate any possible infection source that required to be dealt with prior to these life-saving procedures. Countless times in my career, I've been consulted on children with rampant decay to the point where multiple adult teeth on a child cannot be salvaged, and extraction is the only course of action. Of course, I feel sorry for the patient, but when I look into the parent's eyes, I see, unfortunately, self-blame and regret that cannot be undone. If we vilify fluoride, we'll go down a path where I believe parents will refrain from its usage entirely on their children. This increase in dental disease during a child's formative years may lead to a distorted perception of oneself and possible social alienation that should be of utmost importance. I just want to reiterate that association is not causation, and in closing, water fluoridation is an investment in our community's health and for the well-being of our children. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Wendy Pate.
Good evening, and I am Wendy Pate. I live in Lakeland, Florida. I am here because my commissioners were also voting on this, and they have chosen to take tabling that, and they are going to be voting at this at another time, and they are probably in attendance here today. I thank the doctors for their service, for defending fluoride, that time out of their schedule to come here. I am here, oh, I already said that part, let's see. By giving each side 30 minutes to make their case, you assume, or it would be perhaps an optical illusion, that the two sides were even remotely equal. Based on Dr. Lapato's comments, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, you would have us make an emotional decision versus a well thought out, researched decision. You did refer to brushing teeth, and part of what I wrote to the City of Lakeland is about brushing teeth, so I'll speak on that in just a second. I did read one of Dr. Mallon's, who is a psychologist, PhD, read one of her studies, and somebody wrote about it and basically said that it would be ludicrous to draw a strong conclusion based on that study alone. It had serious errors. This was from Charles Poole, an epidemiologist at the University of North Carolina. This is just a, easy Google searches when you start looking up who is presenting and where they're coming from, so you have a better idea of what to expect at a town hall. So this is what I wrote to the City of Lakeland. And there's only a minute left on that timer, but consider putting a timer on for 2 minutes, which is similar to what we have to speak here today, and let it play. Now consider that that is the amount of time it takes for fluoride to have value on your teeth via brushing. And here's the catch. You have to do that twice a day. And even more interesting, you are not supposed to rinse after brushing. You can spit it out, but you can't rinse. I did not know that. I always rinse. I timed myself at the time, it was 45 seconds for my usual brush, and guess what? I rinsed. So the benefit of the fluoride, probably not as much as I could have had, and I've been doing that my entire life. That is far under the recommended time. You will hear arguments that our toothpaste provides us with enough protection, but I would argue that almost no children nor adults are brushing properly enough to render the benefits of toothpaste using to protect their teeth. I would continue to argue that we don't even know whether all children or adults will brush their teeth at all. People of lower socioeconomic groups are more likely to have poor oral hygiene habits due to lack of access to care. The amount that Dr. Lapato, wants to spend on other methods of providing fluoride would be probably more expensive as well, and having to get education and all those products to children who are more poor.
Thank you.
I know that. Bartow's poverty rate is 15.5%, and for Lakeland, it's like 0.00008 of the budget being spent.
Thank you very much.
More, and I will submit that for your comment.
Liz Suits.
Little, oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Liz Suits. This is Baby Theo, and we are from Lakeland. I feel like a lot of y'all were talking about us tonight in the comments about pregnant women and little tiny ones, and that's why I'm here, because I really didn't have a choice in my pregnancy to decide whether I was drinking fluoride and ingesting it or not, and he doesn't have a choice either whether I drink it and it goes through my breast milk to him. So we are in Lakeland, and we do get fluoride there, and it has been a concern of mine, obviously, and how it's going to affect him. As many mentioned, it is considered a drug regulated by the FDA, and that any drug being ingested should be treated as a medical, like, informed consent situation. And many people don't even know what's in the water. Many people don't have a clue. So how they would be informed, they wouldn't unless they're following what's going on in the community. Some people just don't have time for that. I know I don't, except I thankfully knew about this one and others. But I just want to mention that if an infant is bottle fed, they get 200 to 250 times more fluoride in their water if they're in a fluoridated water situation. So, but it also passes through the breast milk. I had to look that up because I was like, does it? I don't know. So I looked it up. It does. Not as much as, it wouldn't get as much as a baby drinking out of a bottle. But just to point out that infants receive 400% more fluoride per pound of body weight than adults. Not only do they receive this higher dose, they have an impaired ability to excrete it through their kidneys, which can then build up in their system and pass through the blood-brain barrier and just kind of sit there and potentially cause, irreversible neurological defects. And that's something I obviously am concerned about in my baby. I have no other reason, to be here other than concern for my children. I have, nothing vested in this. But it's been concluded, there's been a consensus that pregnant women should try to avoid water with fluoride in it for that very reason, and that infants under 6 months of age should receive no fluoride supplementation. So how are babies and moms who are supposed to avoid this in a community who are being given it without their consent supposed to avoid it? Then they're going to have to go buy bottled water, then they're going to have to do an expensive reverse osmosis system. I don't have the money for that. We just deal with it. My Brita is not going to get it out, but it's the best I got. So also something to consider is athletes who drink tons of water. They get higher dosage, and he gets a higher dosage. Anyway, just something to consider. I say when in doubt, leave it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Robert Goodman.
Hi, I'm Robert Goodman. I wanted to, I kind of changed what I was going to say because a lot of people gave the same medical facts. First of all, I'm going to advise all of you when you go home, if you use a fluoridated toothpaste like Crest or Colgate, go read the warning label on the back. It says if you ingest it, call a doctor immediately. That's required by the FDA for poison control. That should end the argument right there. Another speaker got up and spoke a little about history. I'm going to delve a little more into that. I hope you can indulge me. How did we get fluoride in our water? In the late 1940s, Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, also known for his book Propaganda, was commissioned to promote fluoride in American water. This was an industrial byproduct from companies like Alcoa, the world's largest producer of aluminum. Bernays transferred this waste into a public health initiative by convincing the public of its benefits in preventing tooth decay. He used similar tactics to convince women to smoke because women wanted freedom, so he called cigarettes torches of freedom. So this is the guy who brought fluoridation to you. He used a tactic called 4 out of 5 doctors say. These doctors were hired. That was not disclosed. I do thank the 2 doctors here, Dr. Slott and Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the president of the American Fluoridation Society, and Dr. Slott is their communication officer. I do thank them because that is disclosed and on the program, so thank you for your honesty. Are they unbiased? I don't know. You have to make that decision. Here's a few details. Based on information that I could find while I was sitting here in this meeting, the following countries do not fluoridate their water: Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Spain, though in Spain some isolated areas do, Sweden, and Switzerland. That's a lot of countries that don't fluoridate their water. I think we need to look at what the bigger picture is. I am the faith director for a group called Citizens Defending Freedom. If someone wants fluoride, there are many ways that you can get it. It was said you can get it in tea. It's available naturally in water. We don't need to add to it. We advocate that citizens get to choose. So if you're adding fluoride to water, that takes away a citizen's choice. A citizen is going to get fluoride even if they just exist in our society. So I ask that in Bartow, you don't force people to get fluoridated. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you state your name and
I'm Robert Goodman from Lakeland, Florida.
Thank you.
Paul Childers.
My name is Paul Childers. I'm Bartow, Florida. I've been here since 90, and I just want to say we've been calling it fluoride all night, but to me it's fluorosilicate acid. I've been working with it since 30 years. My previous job was at a chemical plant, and that's what we used to make it. And then now I'm a water treatment plant operator here in Bartow, and I just want to say if the commissioners want it or not want it, just know that to me it's acid. It's strictly, I call it acid. I don't call it fluoride. It's acid. You're putting acid in the water that will dissolve concrete, and you want us to drink it. And another thing is, it's very unsafe. We have to fully put gloves up to our shoulders. We have to wear aprons. We have to wear face shields and all that, because if it gets on us, if it dissolves concrete, it's going to dissolve skin. So I would appreciate it if it would be taken out for my safety, my co-workers' safety, and for the health of this city of Bartow that I love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Troy Lund.
Yeah, Troy, you still
Troy
here?
Lund.
I saw him, but I don't know if he may have left. Okay, darn it. Okay.
Stephen Ellis.
Hi, good evening. For the record, my name is Steve Elias. I live in Winter Haven. My background is I have a master's degree in advanced water and wastewater treatment. Been designing plants in Central Florida for the past 31 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Just want to go through, add a couple perspectives from a design engineer's standpoint of a water plant. Just kind of sprinkle in what hasn't been said here tonight. But fluoride, it's a very strong oxidizing agent. You hear about eating foods that are antioxidants. Well, when you put oxidants in your body, that's probably not a good thing. I was just at a conference today in Haines City talking about PFAS. You know, the carbon fluoride bond is one of the strongest bonds there is. That's why they call it a forever chemical. So putting that in your body is probably not a good thing. You know, that's a factor I would consider. Material safety data sheet, once you get past all the skull and crossbones and the warnings for poison control, you know, one warning at the end, you know, toxicology properties not fully investigated. You know, that's a red flag for me. The EPA study, or the EPA lawsuit, I listened through some interviews of that attorney. It was kind of shocking to me after, you know, all the EPA, CDC, and FDA officials were put under oath that when asked a simple question, you know, are they aware of, do they have in their possession or conducted any studies showing that fluoride is safe for the brain? And they all said that they didn't have any or know of any in existence. That's particularly sensitive to me, partly why I'm here tonight. My dad's got Alzheimer's. So I don't know what the safe dose for drinking water for my dad is, because everybody's getting the same dose. So on to the topic of potable water. You know, our job as the city and the engineers to design safe drinking water. You know, we've talked about tonight, it's a known acknowledgement that it's a medical practice treating gum disease. You know, the patient's bill of right that requires informed consent and an opt-out. That's not possible with fluoride. And the biggest thing for me is, as an engineer, I carry professional liability insurance, but I don't carry medical malpractice insurance. Okay? So if this is a you know, who's responsible for medical lawsuits? You know, I don't want to be any part of that. So I've just personally reached a conclusion, you know, I will never add that to it. You know, I'll never be responsible and design a system that has that. So, you know, you know, with all the studies out there and Dr. Latipo and, you know, the EPA lawsuit, that's just too much to ignore from a risks factor. You know, I would just recommend not doing it. You know, if you want fluoride treatment, you can go to a medical professional that carries the appropriate medical malpractice insurance, where the recommendations are covered for their recommendations, and go get your fluoride treatment there. But I love my dentist, but you know, that's their responsibility. So this is probably the biggest health decision that the Bartow City Commission has ever made for their residents. Okay, I don't say that lightly. I hope you take in all this information and make a good decision for the residents of Bartow and Polk County, really, because, you know, I work down here, and just because I don't live here, we all drink the water in different ways. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
John Lynn.
Good evening. Thank you for this forum. I want to speak from very practically, but first I'm going to thank our Surgeon General, who I admire greatly, Ms. Mullen, and Mr. Cole. Thank you very much. I appreciate most of all that you're willing to step outside of what's considered normal, and I appreciate that. I've watched you since you've come to Florida, and I admire you greatly. I'm John Lynn from Auburndale, if I missed that. Thank you very much.
We were just saying, where is he from?
Mr. Longworth, good to see you again. It's been many years. Even if I were an advocate for fluoride, the city has, or any municipality, has no business administering drugs through their water supply. It's simply inappropriate, and I think there may even be in the future some liability with that. So there's a reason why so many municipalities have ceased dispensing the drug, and I would hope that the city of Bartow would do the same. The FDA has clearly stated that it is a drug. If I could just read something briefly. The term fluoride supplement is a misnomer, as it implies that the product is a dietary supplement like calcium or other nutrients. Fluoride, however, is not a nutrient. A nutrient is something the body has a physiological demand for. They're not optional. We need them. As the FDA has long recognized, fluoride is not necessary to the human health or development. When used to prevent disease, therefore the FDA considers fluoride to be a drug. And if I could speak just from a practical perspective, in light of what we've seen for the past 3 years, I am quite tired of medical professionals telling me what's best for my own body. okay? Whether they be dentists, whether they be medical doctors. We watched with our own eyes as we were told the vaccine was safe and effective. We watched with our own eyes when efficacious, inexpensive, known to be good drugs were purposely denied people that we watched die right before our eyes, okay? I will not any longer submit my body to a medical professional. I see my regular doctor once or twice a year. I take his recommendations under consult, and I make my own decisions. How many times were we told during the past 3 years that it was safe and effective, yet we've watched? I've watched in my own neighborhood 2 or 3 people die from not only from COVID, but now people are still dying from the jab. We all know that. We won't talk about it. We have to come to terms with that. We should never allow that to happen again. And this on some level, however, may be somewhat minor, we're watching the same thing play out.
We're beeping.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. And I just pray that you make the right decision, and that would be to no longer dispense drugs through the city's water supply.
Thank you so much for coming.
God bless you.
I know that's obnoxious to not have more time, but we don't want to be here till 11:30.
All right, we'll get there. All right, so I do want to address a couple of things that I heard when I was first listening to the first presentations. Fluoride is always fluoride, and it's always the same. This is just blatantly misinformation, right? You have synthetic and natural fluoride. You have calcium fluoride, sodium fluoride. They're drastically different, and the sodium fluoride that's added to the water is much more soluble, thus it is integrated into the body and absorbed way more. So that's just blatant misinformation and very dangerous because of some of the things that people are brought up, which is children are being basically given fluoride directly to their brain because the placenta does not filter it out. So as adults, we're like, well, 1.5, it's safe. We're talking about developing fetuses where the placenta cannot filter out the fluoride going directly to their brain. Okay, so that's disgusting. Another thing is the skeletal development of that baby. So I haven't really heard this discussed. This kind of gets under the radar a little bit, but there's skeletal fluorosis. And what happens is the fluoride actually builds up in the bones over time. So we've seen a skyrocket of arthritis, every different type of arthritis. Well, it's very hard to distinguish between these two, skeletal fluorosis and different types of arthritis, when you're diagnosing the skeletal issues. When the baby is developing in the womb, its skeletal structure is literally being developed. And so we have fluoride going directly to a baby that's still being developed. And I want to address the primary argument always made. So they say, there's no study showing that it's not safe. You have to show a study that it is safe. You added it to the water. So that's not how that works. It's like, oh, well, over 1.5, it's admitted a neurotoxin. It's extremely dangerous. But you don't have any studies showing that below that it's bad. Well, no actual study's been done to even try to show it. So that's very convenient. So this is just mind-blowing to me that it's 2025 and we still have fluoride in the water. It's actually just very primitive. And then I'll say one more thing. I actually categorically reject that it was done with good intentions. It was not. It was profit over people. People had to get rid of their waste products. It was very difficult to get rid of their waste products. They added it to our water. That's all there is to it. So there's poison that eats through concrete, put in your water for profit so they can dispose of it easily. It should be categorically rejected across the board. And thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. John Paul.
Good evening, I'm John Paul. I practice in Lakeland, Florida. Do not have the honor of being a citizen of the city of Bartow, which I reckon makes me yet another traveler from a distant land here to tell you how to do your city's business. I do rise to urge you to keep fluoride in your water at optimal levels. I applaud Dr. Latipo for saying that where common sense is available, perhaps we cannot thrash each other with reams of research. I've been practicing for 35 years in Polk County. I help people who have the benefit of fluoride, people who do not have the benefit of fluoride, and perhaps my experience will be of benefit to you. I can tell you where fluoride is available, and fluoride is not magic. It doesn't make all the cavities go away, but it helps. Where fluoride is available, I see cavities come in 1 and 2 per kid, 1 and 2 per grandma. Where fluoride is not available, I see cavities coming in 1 and 2 per tooth. I spend my whole day dragging disease out of people's mouths and trying to restore them to proper function and appearance. Every time I put something in that's man-made, I know for a fact it's going to fail at some point. The question's not if, the question is when. So if I have to put in one filling, I know that at some point, a long and healthy life, I'll get a chance to put in another. I'd rather prevent that entirely and not make my living off of people's pain and misery. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you.
Lindsay Nitch.
Greg? Is it the G?
G.
Yeah, that Greg. R.
Is it an N or an R?
G-R-I.
Okay.
How many more, Jackie? How many do you have? Just sorry, you can't get it right now.
Public speaking is not my favorite thing, so bear with me. Okay. My name is Lindsay Grick. I live at 2120 Saddlewood Drive, so I'm one of your constituents. I'm here to implore you to take fluoride out of our water. One of the biggest issues I have is that when you have an expert who comes to the table and makes claims of no countries in the world have stopped fluoride, but yet quick Google search showed you that's completely false, we have problems, okay? I can tell you wholeheartedly that I have been following this man for the last 4 years. He has helped me save many people from the things that he has done, okay? So I trust when he stands up and says, hey, you need to listen. I am a mother who does not use fluoride, okay? My children are not wrecked with cavities. And don't you think as a mother, if they were, I would change course and go back the other way? Of course I would. Not only my mother, I'm a nurse practitioner, so I understand the medicine, I understand the medicine behind it, okay? I implore you, please, don't put the fluoride in anymore. Thank you.
Sherry Kelly.
Good evening, Sherry Kelly, 865 Lust Place here in Bartow. There have been comparisons to rats and animals and humans, and I'm no doctor, but I do believe human genetic makeup is totally different from that of any animal. I've heard the parts per million, 1.5 parts per million, 1.5 milligrams per liter. I don't know what those measurements are. I don't know how they compare. So this leaves me, again, with more questions. I've heard the first group speak in favor of fluoride. I've heard the second group, in my opinion, rebut that. It still leaves me with questions. I hear our speakers, they speak about, please leave the fluoride. I hear speakers say, please take the fluoride out. Even with all this information, it leaves me with questions. So my question for you, our commissioners, we've had speakers come up and say, give the citizens a choice. The very first speaker we had, he spoke about give the people a choice. The mom that came and spoke, she spoke about giving people the choice, giving them the choice. With all of this information, I am still, I don't know. I don't know. There are pros, there are cons. I grew up with fluoride in the drinking water. I think I'm okay. I mean, we've all had our health issues, and for the most part, we're okay. And that's, again, my opinion. So my question is, in the decision-making for the fluoride, leave it, take it out. Is it your decision, or will you give the people the choice?
I can't answer that right now.
Thank you.
I mean, we're weighing everything, and we are not making a decision tonight, just so everybody knows. We will do that. We're going to talk about that at the end. And we're going to get all these presentations. We'll have a little bit more time to digest what we've seen tonight. But we didn't fluoridate the water here in Bartow till 20 years ago. So I didn't grow up with it here. I'm just clarifying that. I'm not sure. I thought you grew up here. But
I did, and for the most part. I'm saying for the most part. I'm not saying all of my life. I'm saying for the most part.
Okay.
And we learned in 1940 something, they started adding fluoride to water. I was born after that.
I know. Okay.
So, you know, but I'm still with the question.
Well, we kind of are too.
A lot of people have the question. But thanks, everyone, for your presentations, for your pros, your cons. But in my opinion, I'm still with question.
Okay, that's good.
Dr. Joel Boheimer. He's getting 6 minutes. Time is yielding.
Oh.
Yeah, I've been seated an extra 3 minutes. I'm going to try not to use those 3 minutes, please, because it's been way super long, and there's a lot of people who are interested in this who want to talk, and I want to not talk as much. And I do have a PowerPoint, so this is it.
Okay, go ahead.
So Dr. Joel Bohemian from Naples, Florida. I'm co-founder of Stand for Health Freedom, where our concern is informed choice. And I'm also the co-owner of a website called greenmedinfo.com, where we collate research from the National Library of Medicine only. Okay, so this is peer-reviewed research. So on our website, we have 248 unique abstracts of studies regarding the harms of fluoride on the human body, where there's 26 adverse pharmacological actions, okay, including neurotoxicity, anti-fertility, cardiotoxic, oxidative, like one of the people we're talking about earlier, and the list goes on and on, okay? Our website and the research shows that it potentially contributes to 91 different diseases, although the focus here has been on brain, IQ, and ADHD, which is prevalent nowadays. Interestingly enough, I've spoken at a handful of these around the state. I'm from Naples. We had it removed there. We had it removed in Collier County, removed in Immokalee. And every single person that I've spoken to who actually works with fluoride directly, all have either come publicly and said, you've got to remove it because it's poisonous, or they've come to us privately afterwards and said, thank you so much, we want it removed out of the water. These are the people who work with adding fluoride to the water, except, ironically, for dentists. Dentists seem to be the group who are absolutely and staunchly supportive of fluoride because for the last 70 years they've been absolutely and staunchly in support of fluoride. And that's what we have here tonight, except a few of them from IAOMT, but the majority of dentists are, I want to say, really intensely supportive of fluoride. So what we found is the last, there have been two, obviously, that we talked about, the two last big tectonic shifts in the mindset of fluoride have been the EPA's lawsuit, which the EPA was ordered and instructed now to go and remove the fluoride and figure out how to remove the neurotoxicant from the damaging brains of children, because they said anywhere between 4 IQ points to 10 IQ points were being reduced in children, right? And obviously, the National Toxicology Program came out and said the same thing, that it's damaging the brains of children. And that's why we're all here today, and that's why there's standing room only today. And I just want to share a few points, because generally the dentists come up like they did exactly the same thing tonight, including the dentists from the public who come up, and they say, well, the CDC says it's safe, and they say the EPA says it's safe, and the American Dental Association says it's safe. Yet when you ask the experts under oath, and this is the difference, under oath, they will say, just like Dr. Ed Ohanian from the EPA, the question is, a baby that is formula fed receives over 100 times the amount of fluoride as a baby who is breastfed? He's asked the question under oath, and what does he say? Yes. EPA expert Dr. Joyce Suji, do you think the recommendation to avoid the use of fluoridated water in infant baby formula is a reasonable and sound recommendation, she's asked? It certainly appears to be reasonable given that the dose to infants is potentially greater than the reference dose for dental fluorosis and provides no benefit at that stage. Next expert.
There's no need to scream.
Oh, sorry, I just get a little excited when you stand
You're
back.
doing really good though on the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, again, CDC, Casey Hannon. CDC agrees with the NRC that it is apparent that fluoride has the ability to interfere with the function of the brain and the body by direct and indirect means, he's asked. And under oath, he says, yes. And the deposition of the EPA neurotoxicologist, Dr. Stanley Barone Jr., fluoride has the ability to interfere with the functions of the brain. What's his answer? Yes, I believe the findings of the research are correct. And the last one, who is supposed to be the absolute and utmost expert, she is the EPA's expert, Dr. Joyce Donahue of the Office of Water. And she's told and asked, there is significant relationship between low levels of fluoride in the urine of pregnant women and ADHD symptoms in children. Yes. And then the lawyer continues, and this further supports the need for reassessment of current safety standards of fluoride in the United States. And her answer is yes. So when we appeal to authorities of CDC and EPA, and if you go to their websites, they all say fluoride is safe and effective. Yet under oath, when they're told they have to tell the truth, they all say it's dangerous to the brain. And this is why you have standing room only here tonight, and the press is here and everybody is here. Why? Because there's a movement that's sweeping the nation called Make America Healthy Again that crosses political allegiances like we've never seen before, and there's tens of millions of people who are taking their health back because we've eroded the trust. Our government has eroded their trust by the population. We no longer trust the CDC or the EPA because they tell us one thing and then under oath they lie to us. So the question becomes to the people of Bartow, if you're standing there with your child and you're told you could have fluoride in your water, but the chances of your children developing brain damage, lowering their IQs by 4 to 10 points, which is 4 to 10%, is very high, or you can fluoride your water and protect your caries. The answer is clear. The answer is very clear. It's time to remove fluoride from the water. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, who's next?
Jill Sessions.
Good evening. My name is Jill Sessions. I own a home on Walker Lake Road in Bartow/Alturas. I'm just a mom too. I have well water, but I buy food and drinks prepared with municipal water, so I have the exposure. I have a genetic disposition for Alzheimer's disease. I didn't hear a lot mentioned tonight about the correlation between that and fluoride that we ingest. My grandmother died of it, and my father now has the onset. So I have taken a lot of steps over many years to try and reduce my exposure to things such as aluminum and other things. And I just found out recently that fluoride being ingested is correlated or associated with calcification of the pineal gland, which is in the center of your brain. I had no idea. So, like most people have said, I could drink a lot of bottled water and get the PFAS from the plastics, or buy a really expensive reverse osmosis system, or you can just take it out of the water. So I'm not so concerned with my IQ, which was the focus primarily of the study today, because at my age, I don't think that matters a whole lot. So I just ask you to please not force me to ingest fluoride through the food and water that I buy here in Polk County, or Bartow. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chrissy Hen.
Who was that again? Oh, here we go.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Hine. I'm a Lakeland resident right now. I'm mama of 5 kids, and in a nutshell, we clean the water with chlorine, and then we go ahead and add a neurotoxin back into it. It's like, which one is it? So from some people that were for fluoride, I did hear a lot of fear-mongering. For example, give them fluoride so that their teeth are fine, but how much candy are these kids eating, It's a parent's responsibility to make sure that their children are brushing their teeth. We should educate the parents and children on how to, have proper hygiene. I don't consent to having fluoride in my water. If you'd like to offer a fluoridation program per person's home, but I don't want it in my water that I have to now pay a lot of money to get it all removed, basically. So yeah, and I've been fighting for my children for many years. And it's not easy, so if this would be one thing that if they were to take it out of the water, that would help me so much, because I'm doing enough trying to make sure that they have good food, trying not to make them dumber, I'm doing my part to, raise healthy, wonderful children to be adults in this world. And that's really all.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Kelly Murphy Parker.
Hello, my name is Kelly Parker, and I live in Bartow, Florida.
Come a little closer.
Really? You can't hear me? There you go. So I'm a Bartow native. I'm really surprised at all of the people who have come from outside of the community to speak about this. And I'm also concerned about the way in which some of the information has been presented, and I'll get to that in just a second. But I don't understand the pushback against dentists, because to me they seem to be the best ones suited to speak to this issue. Why would we not listen to those who are most qualified when they address the issue and the health benefits of having fluoride in the water? I do have a problem when you start throwing around statistics, because you can twist numbers to say pretty much anything you want. Cherry picking a yes here or there out of a deposition is not helpful. It's not informative. Some of the studies that were cited, they talked about the natural, or that fluoride wasn't added in New Hampshire and Vermont, I believe that it was this the study that you cited? Okay. So
if they're not adding fluoride, maybe their rates are naturally higher. I'm not sure if that's what you were saying, but that's my question. So as I was hearing all of these statistics, I just kept thinking of more and more questions. Talked about a 13% increase in cavities after adding fluoride in Texas. You don't know, or you didn't say that the increase would have been higher had it not been added. To the CDC doctor, to say that I'm not aware of any benefit doesn't mean that there isn't one. It just means that I don't know. There are a lot of things that I'm not aware of, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. I know that Dr. Lapido said that toothpaste and toothbrushes are not expensive, and for you, they might not be. But as a former public school teacher, I fed lots of kids who didn't eat until they came to school. So it's a little presumptuous and dismissive to say that it's easy for them to get what they need. As a Bartow native, for me it comes down to what is best for the people in our community, the people I've grown up with, the people who've known me my whole life. And I am concerned about the safety issues, and I think that definitely needs to be weighed. But to keep it simple, Bartow has always been a place where we take care of each other. If keeping fluoride in our water will help those who are most vulnerable to the adverse health effects of not having fluoride, those without the resources that they might need for optimal dental care, then I think we should keep adding it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pam Luce.
Good evening, I'm Pam Luce, and I am a Bartow resident as well. And I was not prepared to speak on this tonight. I want to say I am so far from being an expert that it is not funny. But Dr. Lapido, I so appreciate you coming all this way down here and the interest you're taking in our communities to spread the word. Like I said, I'm a Bartow resident. I also have 2 children and grandchildren that live in Bartow as well. And I agree with you, with Dr. Lapido as well, that about the misinformation, that misinformation, I've come to hate that word, it can be spread out there. Let me tell you about my 3 children. I've got 3 of my 3 children. I had 2 that grew up. We did all the same things, ate the same foods. They had to brush their teeth every time in the morning, but I had one of my children that when her teeth came in, there were cavities everywhere. It just happened. I talked to the dentist about it and I said, what is this? She's no different than my other 2 children who grew up with no cavities whatsoever. And he talked to me about this, was it, just some people are genetically made to have more cavities. It's just the way they are. So within my family, that was a complete difference. But one thing I do want to say, some disinformation, misinformation, whatever you want to put it, but Dr. Johnson, at the very end of his presentation, put up the Bartow schools and their grades. Well, that is somewhere I'm an expert, is in educational data. There was nothing about that you could use as an example. Do you know that in the state of Florida, in order to be an A school, all you have to have in that school is 65 to 67% proficiency in your students to be an A school, and so we're going to put that up there? So anyway, I appreciate this, and I would like to read these studies, and I'm one who will, but the first thing I'm going to look at is who funded these studies. Where did the funding come from? And I really appreciate our commission looking into this. It's a very, very important decision, and we support you and are so thankful that you brought this to us tonight in the city of Bartow. And God bless you all.
Thank you, Pam. Good to see you. me, okay. Are there any Bartow dentists here? Any in the crowd? Hi, I delivered a packet to every one of you, and I'm glad you came. Thank you for coming. I was hoping we would have more. Do you want to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is that a paper? I mean, I'm just saying, I delivered to 6 dentists, and if you're the only one that came here, I'm a little surprised.
Hi everyone, sorry, I'm not a public speaker, so
That's
I
okay.
apologize in advance. My name is Mary Teresa Prendeville, and I have a practice here in Bartow.
Yes.
And I do want to say, with all my education and my research into the issue, I would be doing a great disservice if I didn't recommend fluoride to stay in the water. Now, I do agree that it should be a personal choice. However, after having treated so many children in public health in Tampa, in Maryland, in New York City, those children that I had treated that were not exposed to fluoride, there is a great, anecdotally, much larger preponderance of caries and severe dental infections, and also tax dollars going to hospitals because of the amount of dental emergencies related to dental infections that were 100% preventable. Fluoride doesn't completely stop all cavities from forming. Obviously, diet plays a bigger role. However, when fluoride is incorporated into the water, when the fetus is developing and the pediatric teeth as well as the adult teeth are developing, when it's incorporated into the enamel, the child has a better chance of not having rampant dental decay than a child who doesn't have fluoride in the water. And anecdotally, I'll just say, my parents are immigrants from Ireland. They both had horrendous teeth. I grew up in Miami, which is a fluoridated city, and I have 5 brothers and a sister. Now, some of my siblings have had some dental issues, but nothing in comparison to that seen in my parents or other family members that grew up in Ireland in a time when they did not have fluoride. So that's just an anecdotal piece there. I understand if there's financial concerns in terms of adding fluoride to the water. It is, I don't know what % of the budget it is, but I do think that our children's health is more important than making this budgetary cut. Neurotoxicity, I wanted to speak to some of the studies that were mentioned. Unfortunately, this isn't really a good venue to talk about studies and statistics because you need to evaluate the goodness of the study. And unfortunately, those discussions are not being had. Not every study is valid or reproducible. So I encourage everyone to look at the research themselves thoroughly. Don't just take one person's word for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Okay, I think that's it for public comment. We will close that section, and now commissioners' comments.
I'll start because mine's going to be very short. This was information drinking from a water hose. So, I want to thank everyone, our guest speakers, and the public for coming out tonight. We don't want to make this decision in a box. We want the citizens' input because it does affect you and your health. I am going to review the information that we were given today, and I hope everyone else will do the same. If you need copies of any of the information, by all means, contact the city and we will provide you any of the resources that we had here today. But thank you for coming out and participating in this. We really appreciate it.
So I'd like to thank both committees that taken presented here tonight. There's a lot of confusion. I understand Ms. Kelly taking and having the qualms of what's right, what's wrong, and again, what's wrong and what's right. There's going to be disinformation, and I say that disinformation not that in any way is telling a story. They're telling a viewpoint of what they're seeing in the data. It's no different than us saying the sky's blue or the sky's slightly white, depending on the cloud going by. Days and days of information has been reviewed by pretty much every commissioner here. If it's out there with Dr. Latipo, videos, on top of videos, to see your presentation, Dr. Milan, I haven't seen. I saw one today for Mr. Cole that I just because we just got the information last night. Haven't seen anything from Mr. Johnson until tonight. But each and every one of you has given us great information to take and think on and ponder. To give it to our city members that have taken and come out tonight. Those of you who came from across the state, be safe going home. That's some distances, I think, from Jacksonville to Naples. So we've covered the gamut for Florida. Thank you for coming. A lot of information for us to go through. It's just going to be a perspective, based on everything that we can go through. So thank you greatly, and to the city members.
Thank you.
All right, again, to reiterate, thank you to everyone, Dr. Panelists. We appreciate you coming and giving us perspective. To everyone that's here tonight and spoke, we appreciate it. People that have been communicating with us in email, I've taken time to go through each of those, and I'm trying to just put my own filter on those and what I'm looking for and my priorities. And I'm looking for employee safety for our staff, teeth health, as well as the health risk of the fluoride itself. So we're trying to figure out what is the best mix of that. And so I am going through each piece. I'm taking a lot of time, but I am not a doctor. I'm not a dentist. And I am just trying to use my knowledge as well as get the feedback from our residents. So I just want to employ those that have not communicated with us or have not been here this evening. If you're listening or watching online, please communicate with us your desires. We definitely want to represent our community.
Yes, one of the things that I appreciate the city of Bartow doing and listening to the other cities and towns and villages who have gone through this is that we just didn't take one side and vote. We decided to have a work session, to listen to both sides. And I think that's important because it helps our citizens, it helps us to make an informed decision. So I think this is one of the best things that we've done. In fact, in looking at the other sessions that I've heard, nobody's done this. Now, somebody probably has, but I didn't see any who did it this way. To have a work session, listen to both sides, and then we will be in a better position to make a decision. And the mayor will explain how that decision is going to be coming about, but not at this meeting. It's time to go. But nevertheless, these are the emails that I received, and it's not all of them. You can't see it here, but right here. These are the emails that I received, and as Laura said, each one of us have really looked and paid attention to the emails that we've been sending. A lot of information. Somebody came up and said, we have been inundated with realms of research, and we really have. We've been inundated with realms of research, but it helps us to make that informed and educated decision. And so I want to say that yeah, back to the decision, back to the process of the forum. This is the one thing that I'm proud that we did it this way to get input. So thank you all very much, and thank both panelists all the panelists for being here. We appreciate your comments, whether we agree or disagree. I think the civil thing to do is it's like a saying that I always think about, and that is seek to understand before you seek to be understood. So we want to seek to understand. So you all, and then you all can seek to be understood from us. So we thank you so much for being here, and as Laura said, have safe travel and God bless.
First of all, this is not about the budget for us, just so you know. We're not looking to cut $20,000 because we need to cut $20,000. This is way bigger and beyond that, so I just want you to know that. I think it's very important to take our employees who we value, that run our city, they recommend this taken out. They know how dangerous it is. It is an acid. I have visited the plant. I've seen the corrosion in the concrete with my own eyes. I've seen the erosion of the metal where it just ate it up. And that's pretty disturbing. This is not our lane. We should be looking at, plan developments and traffic and budget. Health and treating the people of our city should not be our lane, but we're forced into it because this happened way back when and became the norm. And now it's being questioned and people are listening. People are looking at their health. I have a couple of autoimmune conditions. I am hyper aware. Everybody knows here they eat good things that I can't have because I'm not eating. I have to be very careful what I eat so that I don't agitate and aggravate my autoimmunity. I don't want other people that have any kind of health condition to have to be forced to take something in their water that's not going to help their condition. And I am pretty convinced that just the makeup chemicalization of this chemical is not compatible with the human cell. It's just not. If you take a molecule of that in your human cell, the molecule is going to eat the human cell. So I'm taking it real deep. I'm a deep dive on this, a totally different perspective. I appreciate the thoughts. And here's the thing. If we know better, we can do better. And by that I mean, let's go to the school board and let's talk to our superintendent, who we have a great relationship, and say, can we take that $20,000 and can we give free toothpaste and toothbrushes to students? Can we start to educate them in a way that they can learn, either they have to brush their teeth, they take care of their teeth. We start from that ground and we try to come up with something better. I don't believe this is better. I just don't believe it's better. But I want to do better, and I think we want to do better too. And maybe it starts here in Bartow. I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with digging in and trying to find a way. I talked to the Polk County Health Department. I called them up and asked them, I wanted to, figure out where they are. They follow the Surgeon General. The Polk County Health Department follow, all the health departments in the state of Florida follow the Surgeon General. I think that says a lot. Nobody is doubting the benefits topically. If you go to the dentist's office, they have to get permission to put that on your teeth. But we're not giving the people, they're not giving us permission to put it in the water. So, my file is bigger than his file, I want you to know right now. But that doesn't lessen the fact that we're all taking this seriously. And I'm having an ethical problem with it, and I don't know how we even got the authority to do this, because this is a caustic chemical. And so here's what we're going to do. I want to ask the commission, our next steps for this. We have a meeting March 3rd and a meeting March 17th. Commission, what would you like to do? Would you like to put that on the agenda? The city manager and the city clerk, they work on our agendas. And when do you want to bring this back so that we can take a vote on this? We're going to get all these presentations. We'll have more time to add to our folders so they can stack up even more. but we'll have more time to absorb what we have seen. It is a lot, and we're going to take it each in our own way, and you've heard what, okay, so Commission, what would you like to do?
Mayor Pfeiffer, if I may, I would like to push it to the 17th to give the public time to review information, to contact us, to ask any professionals that they feel, you know, has their best interest. I would like for them to be able to do their own research, and I know how long it took us to get here. So I would like to give them the opportunity, now that they kind of have similar information to what we have, to review the information we have as well as do their own research. And to please tell us what you think. Email us. You don't have to necessarily call us or whatever, but please email us. If you want to email to the city clerk and have her disperse it to all of us, that's fine as well. But please let us know what your thoughts are. But I vote for to move it to the 17th.
Okay, I'm looking this way now, you're looking this way, are you?
The 17th for me also, I'd like time to engage with the residents.
All right, so you heard it. So on the 17th, this will be on the agenda. I encourage you, Bartow residents and beyond, if you want, but to please get in touch with us. Oh, goodness gracious. I want to thank everybody for coming out again. Thank you for all your civility and your thoughts. We are going to be noodling this. That's what I like to call it. Thank you again, panel. And
I just wanted to do one more thank you. Our IT crew came up and has our setup so that our residents could be watching remotely. So I just wanted to say thank you to them. They did this in 2 days. So thank you very much.
yes, all our staff. And at the public meeting on the 17th, you're welcome to come. I know you've been here, we've heard you. I'm going to watch the video, the playback on this as well. So with that, what time is it? It's 8:54, that's not too bad. Drive home safe. And with that, I'm going to adjourn at 8:54. Thank you so much.